couple of years ago, when I was working the night shift at this tiny roadside motel, I was about 22 back then, and honestly, the job wasn't much to brag about. It was the kind of place you'd only stay if you were desperate. Just 12 rooms, a faded neon sign out front, and carpets that looked like they hadn't been changed since the 70s. Still, it was easy money, and I kind of liked the quiet. At least I thought I did. Most nights were the same. A few late check-ins, truckers passing through, the occasional family looking for a cheap place to crash. After midnight, it got dead quiet, and I usually just sat at the front desk with my laptop, streaming old horror movies, which is funny now, considering what ended up happening. That night started like any other. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee around 11, even though I probably didn't need it, and settled in for what I figured would be another long, boring shift. I remember the sky outside was cloudy, no moon at all, so the lobby felt darker than usual even with the lamps on. Around 1 in the morning, the first weird thing happened. The service bell on the counter rang. You know the kind. One of those little silver bells you press when you want the clerk's attention. I heard it clear as day. It startled me because I hadn't seen anyone pull in outside, and usually the headlights from a car would sweep across the lobby windows. I got up, went to the desk, and of course, no one was there. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars I recognized. One belonged to a trucker who had checked in earlier, the other to a family that had gone to bed hours ago. I figured maybe I imagined it. It was late, I was tired, whatever. I sat back down. Maybe 10 minutes later, it rang again, louder this time. I swear my stomach dropped because I'd been staring right at the counter and there was no one there. I even stood up quick, thinking maybe a guest had leaned over, tapped it, and ducked back, but the lobby was empty. Now, the rational side of me was like, okay, maybe there's a draft, or maybe something heavy upstairs rattled the bell. But the other part of me, the part that had watched way too many horror movies, was already starting to feel uneasy. I decided to double-check the security cameras. We had 4 old ones set up, one covering the parking lot, one pointed at the lobby entrance, one in the hallway that led to the guest rooms, and one angled toward the front desk. I rewound the footage for the exact moment I heard the bell. What I saw didn't make sense. The bell went down, like someone had pressed it, but there was no hand, no one standing there, nothing. It just depressed on its own. That's when I felt the first real shiver of fear. I mean, I've dealt with weird guests before. Drunk people, people arguing, even a guy once who tried to check in without paying. But this was different. There was no one there at all. I kept telling myself maybe the bell was faulty, maybe the spring was broken and it just triggered randomly. But then, around 2:30, it rang again. This time it was rapid, like someone tapping it over and over. I jumped up from my chair and rushed behind the counter, ready to catch whoever was messing with me. Only, when I leaned over the counter to look down, I froze. There was a hand, a pale hand reaching up from the shadows underneath the desk, pressing the bell with one finger. At first, my brain didn't even process what I was seeing. It was so wrong. The skin was too light, almost grey, and the nails looked dirty, cracked. The hand moved with this slow, deliberate rhythm, tapping the bell like it was enjoying the sound. I staggered back so fast I nearly knocked over the chair. I remember whispering something like, "What the hell?" and my voice shaking. The space under the counter was just a little storage area, where we kept cleaning supplies and extra paper for the printer. There shouldn't have been enough room for a person to hide there, but someone was. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run straight out the front door and never look back, but I also didn't want to turn my back on whatever was crouched down there. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands, whispering to the dispatcher that someone was inside the motel, hiding under the desk. While I was on the line, I forced myself to glance back at the counter. The hand was gone, just gone. The bell sat there quiet and still, like nothing had happened. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and to stay on the line. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My eyes never left that dark space beneath the counter. I swear I could feel something still down there, even though I couldn't see it anymore. It felt like forever, but the police showed up maybe 10 minutes later. They checked the lobby, the storage space, the whole motel. Nothing. The door hadn't been forced, no windows broken, and the cameras didn't show anyone entering or leaving. One of the officers even crouched under the counter with a flashlight and said, "No one could fit down here comfortably." But I knew what I saw. After they left, I had to finish the rest of my shift alone. Believe me, I didn't sit behind that desk again. I stayed standing near the exit, phone in my hand, heart racing at every sound. The bell never rang again that night. The next morning, when my manager came in, I told her everything. She laughed at first, thought I'd been pulling an all-nighter and imagined things. But when I showed her the security footage of the bell moving on its own, her face changed. She didn't say much, just told me to go home and get some rest. A week later, I quit. I couldn't keep working nights there, not after that. The weirdest part? About 2 months after I left, I ran into one of the housekeepers who still worked at the motel. She told me guests had started complaining about the bell ringing at odd hours, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. When they'd come to the front desk to see what was going on, no one was there. I don't know who or what I saw that night. Maybe it was just some deranged person who found a way inside and hid in the most impossible place. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something that wasn't supposed to be there. This story is from back when I worked nights at a small hotel just off the interstate. I was about 21, maybe 22, and I took the job because it was easy money. Honestly, I thought the night shift would be boring, just sitting behind the counter and scrolling on my phone until morning. And most nights, that's exactly what it was. The place itself wasn't anything special. 2 floors, maybe 40 rooms total, with this old-fashioned lobby that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The wallpaper was faded. The carpet smelled faintly like cigarettes, no matter how many times it was cleaned, and the little brass service bell on the counter was the only thing that stood out. I always thought it gave the place a strange kind of charm, though later I started to hate the sound of it. So this one night, it's just after 11 when a guy walks in. I remember because I'd just poured myself some coffee and was about to queue up a movie on my laptop. He was tall, kind of slim, wearing this dark jacket with the hood pulled low. Nothing really unusual, except he didn't say much. Just walked up to the counter and asked, "Can I get room 214? That threw me for a second. Most people didn't care which room they got, but he was so specific about it. I pulled up the system and saw that 214 was open, so I said sure, no problem, and checked him in. He slid a card across the counter. I ran it. It went through fine. I gave him the key card and watched him head upstairs without another word. It seemed normal at first. I figured maybe he was just tired or socially awkward. I went back to my coffee and my laptop and tried to forget about it. A couple of hours passed. It was maybe 1 in the morning when I noticed something weird. I glanced at the reservation system just out of habit and realized his name wasn't showing up. Like, there was no record of anyone booking room 214. I thought maybe I screwed up, so I double-checked the logs. Nothing. It was like the transaction never happened. Now, I knew I had swiped his card. I knew I had handed him a key, so it didn't make sense. I pulled up the security cameras, rewound the footage to when he checked in. And that's when I started to feel cold all over. On the footage, it showed me standing at the counter, talking, reaching out like I was taking something from someone. But there was no one there. Just me, handing a key card into empty air. I remember sitting back in my chair, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I told myself the camera must have glitched. They were old black and white feeds that sometimes cut out. So maybe it just didn't capture him. That's what I tried to believe. But then, around 1:30, I saw him again. I was scrolling on my phone when movement caught my eye. He was walking past the desk, slow and steady, his head turned straight toward me. The hood was still up, and I couldn't see his face. He didn't stop, didn't say anything, just kept walking down the hall toward the stairwell. I waited a few minutes, then decided to check room 214, just to calm myself down. I grabbed the master key, walked upstairs, and stood outside the door. It was locked. I swiped the key, opened it, and flipped on the light. The room was completely untouched, bed still made, no luggage, no signs of anyone staying there. That's when the fear really hit. I knew what I had seen at the counter. I knew I'd given him that key. But the room was empty, like it hadn't been opened in weeks. I went back downstairs, trying to convince myself maybe he'd switched rooms, or I'd somehow made a mistake, even though none of that explained the missing camera footage. I sat back down, staring at the monitor, and that's when I saw him again. He walked past the desk a second time. Same slow pace, same silence, same way of turning his head toward me as he moved by. Only this time, when he reached the hallway, he didn't vanish into the stairwell. He just kept walking until he was out of the camera's view. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone when I called the police. I told them there was a man in the hotel who wasn't supposed to be there, that something wasn't right. The dispatcher said they'd send someone, but it might take a while since it wasn't considered an emergency. So there I was, sitting in this empty lobby with every hair on the back of my neck standing straight up, knowing he was somewhere in the building. I couldn't bring myself to move. I just sat frozen, staring at the cameras. Not even 10 minutes later, the bell on the counter rang, just once. I didn't move. I couldn't. The sound echoed through the lobby, and I swear I felt it deep in my chest. Slowly, I leaned forward and looked around the desk. Nothing. Nobody standing there. But the bell was still vibrating from where it had been pressed. I backed away and kept my eyes on the cameras, waiting for the cops to show. Eventually, 2 officers came in. I practically ran to meet them. I explained everything in this rushed, shaky voice, and they looked at me like I might be crazy, but still agreed to check the place. They searched every room, every hallway, even the storage areas. No one. They checked the locks. Every door was secure, no signs of forced entry. When they asked me which room he was supposed to be in, I said 214. They opened it up, looked around, and confirmed it was empty, just like I'd seen. One of the officers asked me if I might have fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing. I swore up and down that I hadn't, that I'd seen him, talked to him, even checked him in. Finally, they left, telling me to call back if anything else happened. The rest of that shift, I didn't see him again. The bell stayed silent. The cameras showed nothing unusual, but I couldn't shake the feeling he was still there watching. The next morning, when my manager came in, I told her everything. At first, she laughed, said I was probably overtired. But when I showed her the camera footage of me handing a key to nobody, she stopped laughing. She didn't say much after that, just looked pale and told me to go home and sleep. I quit about a month later. Too many nights sitting there, waiting for that bell to ring again, wondering if he'd walk past one more time. I never told most people why I left, because honestly, it sounds insane when I say it out loud.